Hi again, this is Professor Innes, and this is our last module on ethics for this course, which is on utilitarianism. This is the utilitarianism of Jeremy Bentham. If you do other courses, you may touch upon utilitarianism as developed and maybe even improved by J.S. Mill in the 19th century, and in the 20th century by a person called John Rawls, who developed it into a real social and political theory. So nonetheless, what we've got here is a consideration of moral decision-making, the solving of dilemmas, using what Bentham referred to as a far more down-to-earth method, whereby we look at a given moral dilemma and we work out the amount of pleasure we're going to have if we carry out the act and the amount of pain we have if we don't. Now, we equal those up and we think to ourselves, right, if we have the equal amount of pleasure, then simply we must carry out the act, even if we don't want to. It could be, as the textbook for the visiting of a relative at the hospital. And I mean, yeah, you might like going to hospital, which is fair enough for you, but there are lots of people who can't stand going to hospital. So in that way, they'll get a lot of pain from going there, but the amount of pleasure received by the patient will be so high that you subtract your pain from their pleasure, and it adds up to a great deal more pleasure, a plus amount of pleasure. So in that sense, despite you not liking the hospital visit, you ought to go and visit the relative, because more pleasure is gained by that visit than not. So that's utilitarianism. It's for the greater good for the greater number of people. In this case, it was your relative, and in that sense, it's a greater good for them. So that's how you work out how to carry out moral acts. So the text goes through this quite nicely, in the sense that it rejects definitely Kant's argument, and it rejects Aristotle's argument. Yes, we talk about the gaining of pleasure, but that's not happiness. And we certainly talk about carrying out acts because they should be carried out, but that's not to do with anything to do with duty. And with Bentham, we don't have duties. It is the case we carry out the act because it creates the greater amount of pleasure. So what Bentham is borrowing is from hedonism by Epicurus, this notion of pleasure, in the sense that this is more in line with what humans are capable of doing. They're not capable of duty, they're not capable of virtue. So forget that, it's a bit of a fantasy. What we are capable of is working out pleasure as opposed to pain. So that's all we need to do, and that's how we come up with solving moral dilemmas. So you've got the hedonic calculus, and that allows us to put in the amount of pleasure we get from the act and the amount of pain. And again, if we come up with more pleasure than pain, we ought to carry out the act. And again, it might even be an act which is against us. So in a hypothetical, we might say, if it's the case that we drive motor cars and you happen to have a motor car which is 50 years old, one of the classics, you enjoy driving it, and in your particular state, not Idaho but somewhere else, you have the emissions tested, and it says you have to spend $2,000 on correcting the amount of emissions given by the engine. Now, this is clogging the air, making other people's lives uncomfortable, and therefore it's good for the greater number. But it's not good for you because you're going to lose $2,000. So you think to yourself, this isn't fair. Well, this theory says tough luck, as it says in the book. Literally, it's hard luck. In this particular case, you've lost out. Now, in other cases, you may gain a lot, but it's in a greater number. You just happen to be in a minority, and in that way, of people who drive vintage cars, and that's the price you pay. So, bit hard luck there. But that's the way it goes as far as utilitarianism is concerned. It's a useful device which does away with virtue and duty, which we have problems with anyway. We don't really know if they're going to work. Aristotle, it's only 3% of the population could have any chance of attaining virtue anyway. And with Kant, We have conflicts of moral obligations as being just one of many problems there. And of course, we don't know if we possess this thing called free will. Even if we did possess it according to the utilitarian, we're still selfish. Yes, I know I should do this, but I'm not going to. So that's no good. So Bentham comes along and puts upon us this utilitarianism and says here, for the greater good of the number, we will carry out acts which will therefore solve a given moral dilemma. So that's how the thinking goes. And again, it is crude, it is somewhat, unattractive, we might say, but that doesn't mean to say we're not going to choose this. We do have utilitarianism in varying degrees implemented in present-day society, and we have to follow rules and regulations which are for the greater number. And in that sense, we don't particularly like that. It really does crush our free will and this autonomy and self-direction we talk about. So it's just not pleasant, but we've got to think to ourselves, as Bentham said, if we find a better theory than put it into action, and nobody has, so that's why we have utilitarianism as a popular theory here, but not without its problems, of course. We feel violated on a daily basis when we have to do things for a greater number. Right, so that's the argument, and again, a pretty crude one at that, but that's the way you're going to look at it. So, let me know if you've got any questions on that particular theory, please. So, on to your coursework. The essays and exams, again, are coming along very nicely. It looks like just about everybody's doing the full answers. And again, this is good for you at a university setting because it trains you in writing nice long pieces of work. One day, you will need them for work if you don't use them already. You're going to use them in post graduate studies. It's something one needs to do at a university. So they're going very nicely. Nice long pieces of work. Thank you. They're nice to read. And also, we have, oh yes, with the homework, we need to remember as well, which most of you are doing now, we have both sections in a chapter. We have two sections in a chapter. One section is by the writer itself, and the other section is by the author of the text. So we've got Schellinger writing a commentary, and then we've got the philosopher's actual work. So with Bentham, the first bit is by Schellinger talking about utilitarianism. The second bit is by Bentham himself. Now you're supposed to do both chapters with both the questions answered at the end of each section. So you've got one chapter with two sections. So please do the two lot of questions in those chapters. Thank you. I will eventually grade them accordingly. I'm not doing it at the moment. A few of you are still getting away with it, so please write both sections, please. And again, it's good for you to do all this reading, do the original prime reading here. It's all good training later on when you do postgraduate or write those full reports or whatever. And again, reading through things, a lot of reading and assimilating that information is a good skill to have. Right, okay. So, lastly, we're on to our journal. Now, with the journal, you are to write your initial understanding of this week's reading, and just put forward something which you find interesting. It's up to you. It's your journal, so it is your creation. Then I tell you, right, you've made something interesting remark about something. I tell you that, and I say to you, all right, please now go to the helpful hints video where you'll find the 3 prompts. So that's how it goes here. So don't, please, if you're viewing this video already before writing your initial journal entry, reply to these 3 questions, 3 prompts as your initial journal entry. That's not the way it goes. You write your initial entry first, then you go to helpful hints video and get the 3 prompts from there. And again, this is to make sure that all of you listen to this video, watch it, and get some helpful hints. It's not a lecture. You've got the lectures elsewhere. It's not about the reading necessarily. It's just to give direction of what might be missing from the text. So that's the point of watching this video. Everyone should watch it. Please watch the video. So now I'll give you the 3 prompts, and that's what you're going to write in your response in your journal, please. So this is your second entry. So for your second entry, therefore, we've got number 1. Please write about one dilemma which could be solved by utilitarianism. So number 1, one dilemma that could be solved by utilitarianism. Number 2, tell me about the hedonic calculus. Number 2, tell me about the hedonic calculus. And number 3, tell me of your role as a student and how you might be seen as a utilitarian. Tell me about your role as a student and how you might be seen as a utilitarian. With number 3, as with 1 and 2, keep in mind this is utilitarianism. You're not virtuous, you're not duty-bound. You may have to admit you use other people as means to an end. But what's wrong with that? Because it gets you a degree. So that person who knows a lot about mathematics is now your friend for the duration of the maths class. For utilitarianism, there's nothing particularly wrong with that at all. Of course, Kant and Aristotle will be appalled, but they're not utilitarians. So yeah, a bit of honesty here, I guess, might be in need here. But at the same time, with number 3, keep in mind, that this is an admission of utilitarianism. It may come to the idea that you wish to reject utilitarianism as being too repugnant or morally debased or whatever. But do argue that if you do reject utilitarianism, please. Okay, so there are the 3 questions, please, which are put down as a response. Now, I've been talking for far too long, so it's time for me to go. And I'll talk with you online in the journals and probably a few other places as well if something needs to be said. But we're doing very, very well in this course, and we're getting to learn a lot about philosophy. Right, okay, speak to you soon. Bye-bye.